Thank you so much, Naomi, and to all of you for joining us today, and to Helen for sharing her artist eye view and mind view with us today. So, let's see if the technology, if I can do my first job here. Yes. So along with my co-curator, Martha Kennedy, and our exhibit director, Kim Curry, we've been thinking a lot about concepts related to art in action, artists in action, why socially engaged artists do what they do, how they do what they do. And to set the stage a little bit before we start talking, I'm going to show just a few pieces from the exhibition gallery here. This is a panoramic photograph by Bruce Guthrie, which makes it look a little more monumental than it actually is. And so we know that by no means is this a new phenomenon, the idea of socially conscious art. And so in these galleries that look as if they're on the left side of the slide, they're actually in the center of the gallery. We have some examples devoted to the idea of history's long, grand tradition of socially engaged art. So including the earliest work is from the 17th century by Jacques Callot. And we also have Kate Kollwitz, Picasso, and others. Sitting quietly in the first case that you see here, not so quietly perhaps, is Francisco de Goya's beautiful etching from his series Los Caprichos. And in this series, he took aim at the society in which he was living in Spain. And he warned against the the dangers of superstition and ignorance, and also took aim at sort of the authority figures, but also brought it to a human level, marriage, childbearing. And I want to read you the annotation that's on the original drawing for this work, and here's what it says. It says, the universal language, the author dreaming, his only intention to banish prejudicial vulgarities and bear firm witness with this work of fancy to the truth. So that's a big idea. Art's potential to reflect and reframe reality in ways that might help us to get at essential truths. And we also have a large-scale color lithograph by Kerry James Marshall in the gallery. And here's what he says. These are his words. You can't be born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1955 and grow up in South Central LA near Black Panther headquarters and not feel like you've got some kind of social responsibility. This piece is an elegy to the civil rights movement. You can see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy front and center, and above are angels who include Medgar Evers, the 4 little girls who died in the Birmingham church bombing, and others. So Herblock famously was interested in standing up for the little guy, and those are his words, looking out for the little guy. And many, many artists who I've spoken with, contemporary artists, have described some version of wishing to empower the disempowered, give voice to the voiceless. And here we have 2 California artists. On the left is Art Hazelwood, who was a longtime advocate on behalf of the homeless through his art, through curating, through publications. And this is a screen print that is about gentrification worries in San Francisco, so his personal community. That's the other sort of feature, often commenting on behalf of personal communities, but also globally, or both. And on the right, Jessica Sabogal's, this is an inkjet print related to, it was made specifically for the 2017 Women's March, but it's based on, I assumed this was a born digital piece, but it's not. It's based on her screen print, based on her larger mural project on behalf of the empowerment of women, including little Maya, who you see here. So that's just to set the stage a little bit. And I would like to ask you at this point, please, to tell us a little bit about yourself, which is going to reflect on a lot of the work of yours that we'll be looking at soon. Right. This is your map of home.
So I want to thank you, Katherine Blood, for this incredible honor. Martha Kennedy, Naomi, everyone for your wizardry, and all of you for coming today. I am so honored, and really excited. We didn't have to pay anybody to come. So my mom, my husband, my good friends, I am really curators, Santawa and Helen Frederick and Deborah Sokoloff, thank you. Yes, we have already some introduction, and you can hear me, right? Okay. As Katherine mentioned, I was born in Lebanon, and my father was born in Syria, Damascus. My mom is an American from upstate New York. And I will just say, I will apologize in the beginning for people who may have heard some of these little anecdotes before. But in the benefit of people who haven't, I just close your ears and say I heard them. But the reason I bring them up is they're important to, as you go through the work here that Catherine's going to show of mine and part of the collection, it's important to keep it in mind as almost a personal journey, which I didn't really think consciously about, but it seems to be. So we were evacuated from the civil war in Lebanon in 1975 in December. We left my father there. He joined us some months later in France, but I left with my mother and my two sisters. And when we left, I remember very clearly the car that was taking us to the airport, and I asked my dad this is very, sorry.
No.
When we would come back, and he said we would be back in a week. This is very unexpected, sorry. So that week was 35 years later, and forgive me, I don't think I've ever done this before.
No, of course.
Of course, it has to be here. Okay.
We've been crying in the gallery in front of. We'll talk about that
okay.
later.
Oh, good. That makes me feel better. That makes me feel better.
Absolutely understandable.
Thank you. So, the time came in 2010 to go back and to do a solo show in Lebanon. And we went to Damascus, Syria, and Halab, Aleppo, Palmyra, and Jordan. And when I came back, shortly after that, the Arab Spring began. So as Katherine mentioned, what do artists do? We talk about what's around us. I think it's important this sounds a bit lofty, but like visual historians. And I'm not a politician, I can't change the world, but this is the only way I know how to, like you said, give voice to the voiceless, talk about what's going on. So this is one of the first pieces I did called Map of Home. You see that I have the map of Lebanon across my heart and my mind. The sea and the mountains. I mark Beirut, where I was born. My cat.
Star, yeah.
Kitty. There's some sort of a kitty, an artistic license here. His name is Stumpy, but I gave him a big tail. And
empowering Stumpy.
I gave the tail to the tailless kitty. The hand of Fatima that my aunt gave me in Jordan that never goes off. And I like my husband, so I put my wedding ring in. So, and of course, the brush.
Of course.
If you can also think about, if this is a good time to talk about the shoes that seem to factor in several works. The first piece you got from
Please.
the Prayer Rug for America, I put little shoes. Of course, in the Unfinished Journey silkscreen, we also have the shoes and some small painted ones that were inspiration of that. And the other quick little story that I'll say is that the day that we left our flat in Lebanon, the concierge of the building came and told my father we had to leave. There was a big curfew. We had not been to school or outside in the air for I don't know how long. And so we left very quickly. We left everything and ran out into the street.
This is 1975.
And we were running to my father's car to go further down the Corniche, down the water, to go to a hotel to be a safer place than finally to go out. And I don't even know if my mom remembers this, but we were sort of running after them. And of course, you hear what's going on around you, and it was, you know, a war. And my two younger sisters were running too, and Karen was running, and somehow one of her shoes got stuck on the curb. And we looked back, I remember thinking, should we get it, or should we keep running after my father so he won't get mad at us that we're delaying? I don't know. And somehow they have been a symbol for me, unwittingly even. And they're such a powerful symbol of a personal...
Running away.
Yes.
Running to...
Running away, running to...
Other people's shoes.
Yes,
Yourself and others.
exactly. So just to keep that in mind, yeah.
Perfect. I want to tell you one of my personal favorite statements about the role of the artist by James Baldwin, who said, and it tracks closely to what you just said, an artist is a sort of emotional or spiritual historian, is what he said, and that's a very nice segue actually to the very first piece of ours by you that we acquired called Prayer Rug for America in 2001. And after the events of 9/11, the library was involved in a library-wide effort to acquire both documentary and artistic responses to this major historical event. And so we were working, Martha and I and others were working specifically on the poetic, artistic part of that equation. So we went to a show that was mounted, I think, 5 months after 9/11 at Meridian Center, and that was called True Colors.
Meditations on the American Spirit.
On the American Spirit, and we ended up acquiring a dozen works from that show, including this piece, and other artists included. We acquired work by Faith Ringgold, by Robert Rauschenberg. I consider this a signature work of yours. You can see that the shoes appear in the corner. They're a little bit subtle. You have to look for them.
Yeah.
And I consider this a signature work, and you can tell me if you think that's fair, because it gets to the heart of something that also recurs, where it is your wish, I believe, to put the East and West together in better dialogue and understanding, that you're speaking from cultures that you inhabit directly toward this purpose.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's a little squished, but it's like... Yeah,
it's true. The original is here in the room, so you can compare them.
Yeah, it's just squishy for this thing.
Yeah.
But 9/11 happened, and how, as an artist or a writer, a poet, we have to respond to what's going on. Me personally, as an Arab American, for the very first time, felt a lot of negative stereotyping. Even to the point where someone spit on me as I was standing outside the Saudi embassy, actually. And I had never, and then people started looking at you and saying, where are you from? And I never really experienced that negativity. So I decided to keep quiet about where I was from, and I would pretend I was Italian or something, or Spanish. And another friend of mine said, no, exactly, you should go tell them that you're Arab American and you're proud, and so on. Yeah.
Bring it to the human person-to-person level, which is also what you do with your work quite a lot.
Yeah. And so then when the Library of Congress acquired this piece, when you did, and you called me on my machine, and I tried to keep it there forever.
I just learned that recently.
I was like, oh, really? Oh, yes, of course. And I'm like, oh, every day it was like a new surprise. You were on my machine. Oh, my gosh, I was so excited. I mean, this piece, as Katherine said, the East and West, which I feel I'm divided, the Arab side, the American side, and this trying to find some way to meet them together. And of course, in thinking about what I could do that wasn't shouting, like Shauki said, sometimes artists shout, and I think it's very important. In another way,
We have those examples too in the collection.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, yes, for sure.
The full range of voices.
Yeah, and they need to be heard. In a little bit more introspective way, I wanted to create a space. You can see my use of colors here with the American flag and the sort of a prayer rug, if you will, Islamic prayer rug, with the shoes that you would take off to the side as you enter into the mosque, as a sort of other sacred place where you can think about what happened and why it did happen. And to the contrary of accusatory or stereotyping or judging, try to go in there and have a dialogue or think quietly. And I felt
a healing space.
A healing
heartful space.
Yes, right. And Prayer Rug for America, the titles are important to me too. And I was praying for America. All my father's family and friends from Syria, Jordan, Lebanon call and express their condolences, to America,
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah. So, it dates back earlier. There's some foreshadowing of this impulse in your monument series, so I thought we would look at them together, an example alongside, and ask you to dig into that.
Yeah,
this is from 1990, quite a bit.
Yeah, more when I first came here.
Yes.
But yeah, also Catherine was showing me the Capitol right out there. That is
compare
so
this
cool.
to the
Yeah, it's really, this is better.
The original.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Maybe that can be off camera or something like that. But
It's wonderful.
yeah, when I first came here and looking at the GW Monument, George Washington Monument, and the Capitol, and even the White House, Jefferson, they all seemed very white to me. And I felt like I wanted to redo them in a way so that people who live here, who take for granted for living here, for growing up here, for the freedoms that this country affords, think about all those people who try and come here and get a citizenship here and what America represents to somebody from outside. It is enormous. And so I myself do not take that for granted. I learned that from my father, who is so proud as an immigrant to be an American, a naturalized American citizen, and he instilled this a respect for what this country represents. And so with that series, that was what I was aiming for.
And it's a very global portrait. I see Egypt, I see China. I mean,
yeah,
it's really
just,
rich
get it all in
and
there.
Wonderful. So around the same time, at the same time that we acquired Prayer Rug for America, we also acquired the family. There are a few different questions I think I'd like to ask you, using this as a gateway. The recurring importance of family, you've already hinted at why. And also your technical choices. This is a gouache painting, and how your technical and aesthetic and media choices affect your message, if that's a good question to ask. Talk about this subject and technique, please.
Yeah, this also too is a sort of reaction to what's going on, and I felt it was important to show the common humanity of people.
Yep.
I mean, let's face it, mother, father,
We all
child.
have mothers, fathers.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a good mom and a good
You
dad. So, but I mean, I think it was important to show this unity and to show, I'm depicting, quote unquote, Middle Eastern, Arab, that side, to show that humanity and that there's the family and tradition, as are the father stories that you might show in a few slides that tie into that. The patterning behind is based on old Arab and I think maybe Palestinian embroidery as well. That's important and is meaningful and what I grew up with. And so the choice of the background there and bringing the three was aesthetic, I think. we get to have some fun, you know.
That's a very good segue
Yes.
to the father stories. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
going to
these are
tell
some good stories.
I'm going to tell a cautionary tale, and I'm telling on myself with this story.
Okay.
So I came to an exhibition featuring this series, and these are based on stories your father told you.
Correct.
And I was at the show, and I was entranced and looking at one of these pieces and just admiring the filigree fine, beautiful detail, the colors, the patterning, how exquisite. And you sort of sidled up to me, and I said, Helen, these almost have a fairy tale quality. And I saw your face drop. And you said, oh, Katherine, these are real stories. These are real stories of my family. And so this was a good reminder to me not to sit on the surface, but to go deeper, because quite often your work is beautiful, if I can say that. And so I'll ask you please to talk about two things in relation to these images from that series. Can you talk about how beauty operates, the inherent beauty in so much of your work, how that operates, and the choices that you've made there? And also to talk about, I think of you as a very accomplished narrative storytelling artist, and you often work in series, and this is a great example of this. So if you can talk about those aspects.
Yeah, those are such important questions. And as Katherine said, these are part of a series of 25 pieces I did called Stories My Father Told Me. And they are, yeah, true stories.
Not fairy tale.
No. And, you know, in this tradition of storytelling, in Arabic, it's hakawati. And that's my father. We grew up hearing stories about family, about where he grew up in Damascus, and then Lebanon, and then immigrated to America. So the end of that series ends with coming to America. And he's about 18 years old, I think. And one day I got a call to exhibit my work at a gallery for a solo show. And my mom, kind of the night before, was thinking we should record your father telling stories. We would sit around the table and he would just tell, you know, make us laugh, make us cry, whatever, telling us stories. And then I thought about painting the stories. And the gallery loved the idea and he hated it.
Your father.
Whoa, boy, you don't want to get him mad. So I went over.
Personal stories.
Yeah, exactly. And I went over to ask permission, assuming he would say yes. And they also wanted to record my father. Little did they know that was not gonna. So I threw that in too. So maybe he would go with writing them down for me, and he said no, and he just left the room. And so my mom said, go back to your studio and I'll call you. So I came back and my father agreed to write them, but he was not happy with doing that at all because he felt they were personal.
Sure.
They wouldn't be of interest to anybody else.
Oh, modestly.
Yeah, he really did think that, and that they were nobody's business but the families. But in the meantime, people started, especially after 9/11, and going back to the pushback kind of artists against the negative stereotyping of Arabs, Arab Americans, Muslims, was profound in the media. So this series began around 2003 and continued all the way up until actually a few years ago, where he said, this is the last story. It's like, oh, Dad. The quick story, this on the Critiquing the Bride, is a true story. My aunt is in the mulberry tree, his sister, and that's my Teta, my Lebanese grandmother, sitting with a scarf. And this is the tradition of the neighbor in a small village in Lebanon wanting to ask the hand of the young girl for her son, the great son. And Teta, my grandmother, wasn't going to have her daughter marry. She was going to have her go to college or school.
Yeah.
But as a formality, cultural norms in the village, you accept the invitation knowing you won't go through with it. And my aunt was like 10. So the lady next door with a son, and the tradition is my aunt is supposed to serve sweets and coffee and present them, not to say one word, and just to look good and act good, and see if she's acceptable for the fine son. And so my aunt got wind that was going to happen, and so she ran away. She hid in the mulberry tree, and
arms crossed.
yeah, oh yeah. And then she hid behind the flour that was stored for the year, and she never appeared. So the lady was mad. The neighbor lady was mad, and she left, feeling rebuffed. And my aunt reappears. She had flour all over her, and Tata was going to get mad, but she started to laugh, and Aunt Mary ate all the sweets and coffee, and the marriage proposal never went through. The other one, birth of a baby, is also with a tradition in a village where the woman would have a baby. She would stay in her bed for about 40 days, and of course, he would have the midwife there. And the husband, I put him there in the corner smoking the hubbly bubbly, like not doing anything. But
luxurious.
Yeah, my slight little jabs, you know. So, anyways, yeah, like he's casual and not having too much to do. He would never be there in the room. So the tradition is after the baby is born, the midwife will go and locate the husband and say, what is the sex of the child? Boy or girl. And my father, when he was telling me the story, I really wanted to get to the bottom of like who is more important, a boy or a girl. And we know it's a boy, but my dad was too diplomatic. He wouldn't say. So I said, Dad, so the father puts coins on the bed, depending on the sex of the child. And we know the boy's got more coins, but he wouldn't say that. And then the tradition is preparing a special food dish that is offered to the guests. That is like a cream of wheat and soft, and indicating the child doesn't have a tooth yet. Just to congratulate the child. The kitty would never be on the bed, but yeah.
Artistic license.
Yeah. Yeah. But I didn't answer your question about beauty, but it's okay. We'll get to it.
We'll get to
it. Yeah.
So one of the recurring themes in the Art and Action Show is the idea of artists harnessing history and art history in a variety of ways and for a variety of reasons. And so I'm just quickly showing a pairing that we did with an editorial cartoon by Herbert Block, known as Herblock. And this is made just days after the death of Picasso, and there's a plaintive caption, "No more lessons, Pablo." And then we're pairing this with a David Seymour photograph, a portrait of Picasso when his masterpiece, Guernica, was brand new in 1937, and still one of the great, iconic, indelible milestones in the history of political art and protest art. And I show this because you also are interested in Picasso and other Western artists, Klimt, Mondrian, others, and here obviously Lichtenstein.
Right.
And so this is these are two images which are featuring another recurring motif in your work, the black women wearing the black abaya.
Yeah.
Talk about the meaning of this and also about your referencing of Western art history, another way of connecting East and West.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very consciously. And this series also began after 9/11. It seemed to be like this continuing pushback. And opening a dialogue is ultimately and you can do it with a sense of humor or beauty, which is my way. And Shauki.
It's very effective. These are both very effective methods of sort of causing you to enter into a work that's welcoming and accessible immediately.
Right. I mean, I think that's very important because if I'm asking you to look at something that's so painful and your impulse is to turn away, I myself have confronted that as an artist, even though I know it's very important. I mean, I was on a panel with a German photographer who we were talking about the Syrian refugee crisis, and he had these huge portraits, almost life-size, of little children from the refugee centers in Berlin. And they had lost arm and eye and damaged.
Documentary photograph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And big.
And
I mean, they were really in your face.
Impossible to look at
Yeah.
without wanting to shrink away.
Wanting to turn away. And I asked him, he asked the audience, he said, please, if anyone knows how I can exhibit my work, I would like to know, because nobody wants them. And I was thinking about that so much, because he can't tell his message if no one's going to look. So the way that I use beauty, a subtlety, more like tricking you into look, and then once you're there, you can see and hear my message. The abaya I use also as almost like a motif. And of course, Liechtenstein and this piece people responded a lot to it. I'm Not Who You Think I Am.
From your Changing Perceptions series.
Changing Perceptions. Using Western artists, recognized artists, and reconfiguring with the abaya.
And testing assumptions about what we think we know about the abaya.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, and that everyone has a suicide bomb, which was, kind of what you thought that was, and if it's oppressive or not oppressive, but at least they open dialogue.
Absolutely.
Which is also a little step to possibly changing somebody's point of view.
Generate dialogue.
Exactly.
Hopefully better understanding.
Exactly, yeah.
So, talking about art in action, artists literally in action, you've served multiple occasions as a cultural envoy for the U.S. State Department. Mm-hmm. And here you are in Palestine in 2008. Mm-hmm. And tell us about what did you do there?
Well, I was sent for a month, actually, to the West Bank. I wasn't permitted to go to Gaza, but I had a workshop in Ramallah, and I would go and these women, in this particular slides here, they were in an UNRWA school, United Nations Refugee School. And here I come in talking about Picasso, assuming that they knew who Picasso was. Like, who doesn't know? They did not know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I put up some of those, pieces, and they didn't know. They didn't know. It was really a fascinating time, and ultimately, the State Department's agenda, as in sort of the beauty and the paintings kind of thing, it's the soft kind of way of changing hearts and minds. So I was there for a month, and in the beginning, when I introduced myself to the students, and they ranged in different villages and ages, and I told them that I was half and half in Arabic. I said, I'm nus-nus. And I said half American and half Lebanese. And when I felt somebody put her hand on my elbow and just go like this to me. It was my very first day there. I was so scared and cold. And just like, go like that. I'm like, oh no. And she goes, no American, no American. I said, okay. Lebanese. I said, okay. I get it. I'm cool with that. I'm Lebanese. That's fine. So as the days and the weeks went by, and I saw these women like every day, and we worked in the Sakakini Center every day for several hours. Towards the end of my stay there, several of them gathered to me and asked me if I was married. And there were protests going on outside of anti-American. Things were heating up, and so I just thought, oh no, what am I going to do? And they said to me, is he Lebanese? They just assumed. And I thought, oh, I would have to confess he's an American. What am I going to do? Like, oh my gosh. So I just thought, I have to say it. I can't make it up. So I just said, no, he's American. They looked at me, and they looked at me, and then they said, what's his name? And even though I call him the sheriff, as you know, a lot of people know, his name is Andy, and I wasn't going to say the sheriff, so I said his name is Andy. And all of a sudden, these women just started practicing Andy, 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 like saying it, like Andy, Andy. And then they looked at me and they're like, okay, next time you come back and visit us, you bring Andy. Right?
Fantastic.
Yeah, right? And I thought, you know what? Score for the State Department. Because it went from that to accepting and seeing that we weren't so evil and so on and so forth. So it was
family, human.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
Ultimately, that's exactly, So it was an incredible experience. Probably it meant more to me than it did to them.
And it culminated in an exhibition?
Yes.
During International
Yes, we
Women's
had a
History
beautiful,
Month?
yes, and they were so proud. It almost didn't happen because there had been an assassination in Bethlehem, and after a whole month there, it almost didn't happen, and I just was beside myself thinking how, because it was so important for them to have their work on the walls, and the consul came, and our consul general came. It was a big, big deal for them, and so we managed it. Yeah, it was very important. And here they are using my changing perceptions. It's like
a lower image.
I know, it just like cracks me up.
Yeah. So, 2010 was a big year for you. You talked about this in the beginning. Returning home after 35 years, after being evacuated. And this is one piece that's responding to that. Talk about how that was. And also, we've been looking primarily at gouache paintings. I'm coming back to the technical question.
Yeah.
This is something very different. Why this technique? Why did you choose this technique, and what is the technique?
Well, yeah, it was a very big departure for me. I've never done anything like that.
I'd never seen anything like this.
Yeah, it really was.
In your body of work.
No. And the word that I've written over and over again is bait, which means home in Arabic, but engenders more than just the structure of home. It engenders the village, the traditions, big surrounding family and neighbors and so on. So it's a weighty, weighty word. And when I was thinking about going home for the first time, I started thinking about this idea of home. Where do we call it? Now I've lived here longer than I've lived there ever. Ever, So is this my home, and the idea of this circling that we do and moving, and is it forced moving, like I was forced to move? Is it voluntary, this idea of where do we belong? And this meditation, it turned out to be writing this word over and over and over again. Later on, I was on a panel, I think I may have mentioned this to you, with a woman who was at the children's, the hospital here for children. And we were invited to be on a panel at the World Bank together. And she went before me talking about her art therapy with the patients. And she said that the work, a lot of times what the children will do is this sort of obsessive writing over and over and over again as a form of almost stress relief, and something that they do instinctively. There is no to be teaching them to do that. And so all of a sudden, when she said that, I was thinking about this piece. I was going to talk about it, and I looked at it in such a different way that my instinct for going back and this sort of dealing with a lot of unpleasant memories that I had, it came out in this way. And since I've used ink in this black and white kind of depiction of what I want to say, but I don't know. It just really just came out. It really did.
I have good news and bad news.
Oh no. We're going. It's time. They're dragging us off.
The good news is we have 5 minutes left, and the bad news is we have 5 minutes left. So
Okay.
we're going to go
Let's
quickly
go. We'll
through
scoot. Yeah, sorry.
6 more slides. I don't
Because they want to ask questions too, right?
Because we want to leave time for
Okay.
audience questions. So this is the first piece in your Arab Spring series. Take us into this piece, which is also in the room today.
Right. So quickly, the very first piece in the initial days and months of hope and optimism to do with the Arab Spring. So I began using the flower motif, of course, with that motif again of the abaya. And as it devolved, I tried to keep use of the flower and also symbolizing hope, which is ultimately crucial, because without it, we don't have anything. And, you know, we do.
This is a very positive piece. And then, later in the series, I'm trying to show. Here we go, tinderbox.
Yeah,
Several
and these
years
are,
later.
they're sort of like that. I began saving everything to do with the Arab Spring in the newspaper, and so this was chronological from the bottom, collaged headlines so that for the first couple of years of the Arab Spring, and I had intended to continue this series. You mentioned series, but I didn't. I just kept moving on because this is called the tinderbox. It was devolving so rapidly and turning
increasing instability and this fractured.
Yes, and turning into
collage.
The civil war in Syria.
We can't miss this is in the exhibition, which is one floor below us, and we hope you'll visit after the talk. So this is called Unfinished Journeys. Is this your first hand-pulled print? I thought it was. Made at Navigation Press at George Mason University with Helen Frederick. And again, with the shoes and specifically about the Syrian migration crisis.
Yes, talking about...
This is the Herblock that we paired it with, which is also about the plight of children during war.
Yes.
And displaced persons.
Yeah. Immigrants and people and the little shoes, I had been painting them over the summer, and then we can get to that slide of it. But and Helen Frederick, who's right here, invited me as an artist in residence at George Mason University in conjunction with El Mutanabi Street starts here after the bombing in Iraq in 2007 of the famous Street of Books, the bookseller. And so she loved my shoes, Helen loved my shoes, and we used this patterning and the stitching, the gold stitching that is on top. It's an 11-color silk screen, and my first, with as you say, master printer Sarah Zuckerman.
It's mind-bending.
Mind-bending. It was such an intense experience.
Of this piece.
Yeah.
And it's about a very specific story. I'm going to move to the next slide, which will help us tell that story about a particular child in 2015.
In 2015.
Alan Kurdi.
Alan Kurdi. So that is a hard painting. And I debated, we talked about this yesterday at the Wilson House. It's part of my Syrian migration series, and I felt it was important. I think artists, too, what we are tasked with doing, I think, is keeping memory so we don't forget. And I debated on this piece. I really did. The photograph says it all, the original photograph. But I also thought, well, I don't want to forget this little 3-year-old boy.
Who drowned with a group of Syrian refugees trying to reach the Greek island of Kos in 2015.
In 2015.
And this tracks very closely to the press coverage photographs.
Absolutely. And he has his little shoes on. And you know, I mean, I was saying yesterday that I would confront him in my studio every day. And I would talk to him. And I cried painting this piece, and I also said, I won't forget. We won't forget you. And
it's a memorial.
It's a memorial.
A loving memorial.
A loving memorial. And this German curator came to see it at a show, and I had just met him, and he turned around, and he was crying. And I looked at him, I said, I'm sorry, you know what? He said, Helen, I forgot about this story. And he said, I'm so glad you painted it.
Memory.
I forgot about it. And so it's So we won't forget about it. And I wasn't the only artist who did any number of things memorializing him.
Yes.
And the shoes are a takeoff on Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go. And the assumption that we have that we just get our dreams, right? We're here, we get our dreams, and fortunately we are here and we do get our dreams, but sometimes you don't. Those little kids crossing borders, and they don't. And not just in the Syrian, but all over.
That's a good point to make with this piece, and we'll end here and open for questions next, I believe.
Yeah.
We have more slides, but I think we need to
We're going to
end
lock
here.
you in here. You can't go anywhere.
So this is based on the first piece in Jacob Lawrence's famous migration series from May between 1940 and 41 about the African American migration from south to north. And in his painting, they're quite different, but there are also people streaming through gates,
Right.
going to Chicago, New York, and St. Louis, and here it's Turkey, France, and Germany.
Right.
And this is part of your Syrian migration series, which is in part responding to Jacob Lawrence.
Absolutely.
And the latest piece that the library acquired of yours. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a series now. I have 25, and Jacob Lawrence is such a big inspiration to me, and I thought I couldn't help but draw the two parallels together there. And so I began on this journey, and this was the first piece I did, though not sequentially, that I felt it was important to tell the story of the Syrian migration that has evolved into 13 million refugees in the short space of like 5 years, as opposed to the Great Migration, which began around World War I and lasted until 1970. Around 6 million African Americans migrated. The impact of this incredible number of people have affected Europe, Turkey, this country, in resistance against the other and anti-immigration sentiment. So I felt it was so important to talk about this through this series.
By connecting this work to the very well-known and beloved American masterpiece by Jacob Lawrence, you were doing, what were you hoping for?
Well, I was certainly hoping to bring parallels to the plight of the African Americans leaving the South to the North, as did he did in a beautiful way with his pieces. They're beautiful, and the short narratives that accompany each. You know, he tells their story. He gives them dignity and beauty. He describes the violence. He does, and the aggression against them, but he also inserts hope into his panels, and I also hope to achieve that in my series. It's not finished yet, but
Ongoing series.
Ongoing.
And again, the subtext is humanist, human level.
Exactly.
I think we'll open for questions. We have microphones in the room. Naomi's here. Please let us know if you'd like to ask a question. Or questions. We have one here. Thank you.
The first thing I want to say, which I said to you privately earlier, I want to thank you and thank the co-curator to show such a bold exhibition. Usually people shy away from something that can be controversial for some people, so I cannot thank you enough for hosting this show right here at the Library of Congress. Thank you. Helen, I've known you for so many years. We both are from Lebanon. And I told Helen that I will say publicly what I said to her privately. You saw all her work. It is absolutely fascinating that it comes from a woman. Every time I listen to her, and I heard her lecture at George Mason where I teach, and at the end of the lecture where I heard her story for the first time, I told her, what is so amazing in your work is that you take horror stories and tragedies, and you say them in a way as if you are a mother saying a story, a bedtime story for her children, to tell them the world is going to be okay, you're going to be fine. It's a beautiful word despite of all of this. And if you haven't seen how beautiful she is representing her tragedies, then we are missing the dichotomy that is in her work of bringing tragedy into aesthetic level of color and beauty and rhythm and pattern, where, as she said, it gives me the opportunity to talk about it. So I do want to say thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you.
Two questions, one for you and one for you. The question to you, Helen, is, as a Lebanese American, also I can relate to many of your stories. But what fascinated me in your presentation today, which I didn't even really think about the first time I heard you speak, is why I haven't seen one single image about the tragedies of Lebanon as a Lebanese American, as someone who has so much love to Lebanon. I haven't seen that happening in the work, and I'm just wondering why. And the other part, you're Lebanese American. I haven't seen work about the American response to the tragedy of the immigration, which sometimes is very hard to talk about being in this country. And like you said, I, like you, I have a lot of respect and love for this country, but nonetheless, it doesn't prevent sometimes from raising the question of why we're doing the things that we are doing, and that will relate to the question that I want to address to you. That is a very bold show. And like you said, I mean, I was amazed that you have the Goya print here, which is absolutely fascinating. You spoke about Guernica. What would you do as a curator working for the Library of Congress if you really had work of art that criticized America? How would you respond to that? Especially from what I know, that it might endanger your funding, it might endanger some people who are in and out of your place. How would you deal with such issue?
Good questions. Thank you. Thank you so much. Would you like to begin?
No, you do.
Okay. I'm very glad that you've asked this question. So we're celebrating a very particular slice through a very particular subject today, and a wider slice in the Art and Action show downstairs. But I have to say, as a curator and a librarian here at the Library of Congress, we actually are serving everyone, and we're trying to represent the broadest possible range of voices. If we're serving Congress, we're serving everyone in this room and beyond this room and out into the world. And so we're really trying to reflect, in my particular piece of the library, which is visual art, documentary, and artistic, everybody, including opposing voices, including anger and appalling, unbearable images, photographs, prints, and posters. They're all here, living in perfect harmony on the shelves at the Library of Congress. And so our job is really equal opportunity, and the point of this, let me say the point of this. The point of the information is to give the building blocks that can lead us to learn, to acquire knowledge, and hopefully, I think this is written as part of our mission, wisdom. And that's the point of it. We're not trying to proselytize. We're not trying to promote one particular agenda or personal beliefs. Does that answer? Okay, good.
No,
Thank you. That's a great
really
question.
Cool. Yeah.
It's true.
I know. We'll talk. Oh, no, I know. Yeah. More questions?
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm sorry to grab the mic after Chow. He has two teachers up here, but we do love you so much. And
Thank you.
This has been so articulate, informative, new information from both of you. I mean, you're in my eyes just stars to give us information. The show, to me, reveals the power of art, the good and the bad side. And so last night I was at a very interesting talk at the Cato Institute where there's a show called Freedom Art as Messenger.
Yeah.
And on the panel, Janice Goodman, who's a professor at the Corcoran, spoke about young people in terms of understanding how to describe the power in their art. And at a final review, a student came in with a live mouse and a guillotine and killed the mouse. And she was in shock and couldn't move. And of course she said, why didn't you use a stuffed animal? I mean, so it brought up animals' rights. It brought up sensationalism. It brought up so many things that you aren't talking about.
Right.
Because you have the history.
Right, yes.
You have the homeland. You know where you're navigating. And so I think the thing that this show can do most is educate students, you know, and how things reoccur. That Herblock is showing us what's here today happened before.
Exactly.
Right?
This circle, do we learn?
So I thank you so much for this talk, really. I don't have a question that I can think of except
very nice.
the power of art is what I think we're questioning. Yeah.
And you're leading me to tell a quick story. We're running out of time. Naomi's telling me. We had a panel discussion. Where's Sarah Duke? Sarah Duke was part of this Ink and Pixel panel, which invited editorial cartoonists from papers who were leaning from left to right and center. And I can't remember who it was who said to a student in the audience who asked a question, he said, I don't care what you think. What I care is that you've studied the matter personally, carefully, and come to an informed decision. So
that's what we try to do.
The power of art to help us enter into challenging subject matter in a way that almost nothing else can.
And
you can
create
think of
empathy.
poetry. You can and create empathy.
And create empathy.
And bring it to a human level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's actually a good place for us to end. Yes, this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much to both Katherine and Helen. And know that they're going to make their way down to the gallery, so if you'd like to with Martha Kennedy in the back, as well as please do take a chance to take a close look at the work in the back. But if you'd like to talk more, you can.
Coming home with me.
Oh,
Abaya Driving, I told Katherine, Abaya Driving is taking Arab Spring home. They've left the room.
oh dear. Okay, well, you can see
I'm
other things.
taking them back.
So you can continue the conversation throughout, and thank you both very much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.